day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then two will be in the field. One will be taken, one will be left. Two women will be grinding meal, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. The Gospel of the Lord. Therefore, you also must be ready. Get ready. Be ready. Yeah, I know. Christmas is less than a month away, and I gotta get ready. You do too. But here's the great thing about being ready for Christmas. I know when Christmas is coming. I know what's going to happen. I have a pretty good idea of what I need to do in order to be ready. Because even for those of us who are the most kind of outside-the-box thinking people who like a lot of variety in our lives, for the most part, Christmas ends up being one of the most traditional times of the year. We know what to expect. We want it to be like it's always been. And so getting ready is relatively easy because we know what decorations and music we want to hear. It's the same stuff every year. We want it to be like that. Don't mess with somebody else's Christmas decorations or you're in for a big fight. Even people who never come to church expect to hear traditional Christmas carols playing and get sometimes upset if those things are not there. I remember a couple of years ago, about this time of year, my best friend since we were in high school came over and he was all incensed that the radio was playing some newfangled version of some Christmas carol, and he's like, "You're a pastor. Is this even allowed? Is this even a thing? It shouldn't be allowed." And I said, "Well, sure, you can do lots of different, there's a lot of people like those, there's lots of things." He says, "But it's wrong." And I sat there and I listened to him. I said, "But look, Rob, you're Jewish. Why do you hear Christmas carol?" And he says, "Because it's tradition. It's the way it's supposed to be." And a lot of people are like that. It's, we know the way it's supposed to be, and we want it to be that way, and we know how to get ready for it because we know what's coming. We do that with foods that we eat at this time of year. Thanksgiving, Christmas. Lots of us have all kinds of really weird, bizarre, family traditional foods that we would never eat except during this time of year. And it's hard to find the ingredients for these things, but we know where to find them. We know where to look. We know how to get ready because we know what we're going to make. That's just the way it is. And we even know who's probably going to be coming to dinner. Even if there are some weird and eccentric relatives and friends that are going to be there, those people, the thing is, we know they're kind of weird. We know they're kind of strange, and we can prepare for it, and we're ready for it. But what if I don't know when something is going to happen? What if I don't know what it's going to look like? What if I have no idea what finally, in the end, is going to happen? How am I supposed to be ready? And how would I even know if I was ready or not? See, that is the great challenge that the season of Advent puts before us. When Jesus says, "You also must be ready," he is, of course, not talking about getting ready for Christmas. He's talking about being ready for God's future. He's talking about being ready for the kind of future that God calls you to and that God calls all of us in the entire world to be part of. He's talking about being ready to respond in faith and hope so that each one of us can be part of that future. You also must be ready, Jesus says, but ready for what exactly? Jesus goes on to say that you can't know when. Even he says he doesn't know when. The signs are not necessarily the signs that we're expecting to see, and the picture of what it's going to look like is kind of vague. So, how am I supposed to prepare? How am I supposed to get ready? How am I supposed to finally prepare myself when things around me are changing and chaotic, and I am just not really sure? what I'm supposed to expect. Unfortunately, Jesus doesn't lay out a nice, neat spreadsheet full of things that we're supposed to do in order to get ready. Instead, he simply says things like, keep awake. That is, pay attention. Pay attention right now by opening your eyes and your hearts and your minds to what's happening in your heart and in the world around you, in the lives of other people. Watch. Pay attention. God's future, Jesus assures us, is coming, and God's plan and purpose will, in the end, reign supreme. And part of God's plan is that we're all going to be included in it. And so even if we can't know exactly what it's going to look like, Jesus' call to all of us is to pay attention, to stay awake, to be ready. But you know, paying attention can also be a hard thing to do. And that's because paying attention means watching and paying attention to stuff that we would rather not admit happens. That we would like to just roll over, go back to sleep, and just ignore, especially if it's not supposed to happen or it's not supposed to happen here. In the last couple of weeks, some of the stuff that has happened around here that I've seen that I would rather roll over and go back to sleep are things like racist graffiti being sprayed on the back of a church sign. Somebody goes in and writes, "Trump Nation, whites only." Or a kid wearing a Trump hat who goes into a anti-Trump demonstration and he gets beat up, hospitalized, because he gets in an argument with the group. And I sit there and go, you know, I know a lot of really conservative people, and I know a lot of really liberal people, and none of them, in this county especially, are good with the idea that there should be racial bigotry or bullying. Nobody is in favor of violence against other people who don't have their same views. And it's one thing where we say, well, we know these things happen in other places, but it's not supposed to happen in Montgomery County. We're more enlightened than that. This doesn't happen here, but it did. And it does. And part of keeping awake and paying attention is watching for the things that happen around us that we know are not part of God's plan. And being willing to be signs of God's coming future by being people who speak out and work to make sure that those kinds of things don't happen as much. And that kind of staying awake and paying attention, that can be hard. It can also be hard to pay attention in the midst of all of that to the good stuff that's going on. So much of my news feed and Facebook and everything else has been filled with kinds of really bad stuff that's been going on and people that are angry and upset with each other, that it can be easy to miss signs of hope, signs of joy, signs that God has not abandoned us. You know, the baby pictures that get posted all the time, the pictures of the sunset, the examples of people who have actually reached out and lent a caring hand to somebody else. Those things still happen, even in the midst of really difficult, trying times. And some of paying attention and staying awake is about being people who can look and see the signs of God's love and God's hope in the world, even when things around us seem to be a mess. So often we define times and ages by wars, terrorist attacks, by depressions and things like that. But in all of those moments, there were always signs of hope. There were always life-giving moments. And part of paying attention is seeing those, celebrating those, pointing those out to others so that others can see God's coming, even in the midst of difficult and anxious times. And maybe one of the most important things that we need to do, and this is another hard thing about paying attention, is that we need to pay attention to what God is calling us to do in our regular, everyday lives. Because so often we read these great big apocalyptic stories during the season of Advent, cosmic signs and the roaring of waves and the blood, the moon is turned to blood and all that kind of stuff, and we go, wow, how am I supposed to be part of this big change that's coming upon the world? Or what can I do to stand up and fight some great injustice? And often, what Jesus is calling us to do is to see in our everyday lives the ability to be a sign of God's hope and God's love in the midst of the world. We read, for instance, in today's gospel reading, there's a story about the two guys who are out in the field taking care, working the grain, and two women at the mill grinding the grain. And one is taken and one is left. And we tend to read these stories and we go, ooh, what did one of them do right or one of them do wrong, so that one is taken and one is left? And there must be some secret thing going on here. And they write the Left Behind series with this kind of stuff in mind and all that kind of stuff. Except, here's the thing. Every other place that Jesus talks about people doing stuff before the arrival of the Son of Man, where they're just doing their regular job, he commends them for that. That's what they're supposed to be doing. And these two men in the field, and these two women who are at the mill, are not doing random things. It's not like, two guys are out playing golf and two women are out taking a run. They're doing the two things that are absolutely essential in Jesus' day so that everybody has bread and can eat. The two essential tasks were the grain had to be planted and cultivated and harvested, and then the grain had to be ground up in flour so that people would have bread. In doing those things, they did exactly what God wanted them to do until it was no longer necessary, because they were a sign of God's love in the life of the world. They were a sign of hope, because they were the people for whom God worked to give bread to everybody. And sometimes that's what Jesus is calling us to pay attention to. What is it you're doing in your own regular, everyday life that can be a sign of hope and love in the life of the world, so that God can work through you to be a sign in anxious times? Personally, I would still love to be able to have a spreadsheet that tells me everything that I'm supposed to do to go get ready. And it would be so much easier if I knew exactly when it was going to happen, what it was going to look like, and how it was all going to go down. But maybe being ready is more than checking off a bunch of stuff on a list. Maybe being ready requires thought, prayer, and imagination. And maybe that's why Jesus simply tells us to stay awake, to be alert, to pay attention. Pay attention to the bad stuff that isn't part of God's plan, so that you can speak out and work against it. Pay attention to the signs of God's presence and love in the world, so that you can celebrate it, point them out to others. And pay attention to what you're doing in your everyday daily life, so that God can work through you to be a sign and a foretaste of the coming reign of